It began with a playful tease, but the way she looked at me that day made it clear, some secrets aren't meant to stay hidden. The afternoon light stretched lazily across the street as I walked up to my friend's house. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just dropping by like I had 100 times before. But when I rang the bell and the door opened, it wasn't my friend standing there. It was his mother. She leaned against the frame with the kind of presence that made the world pause. Her hair was tucked back loosely, strands catching the golden light, and her smile held something playful, something knowing. "Well," she said with a teasing glint in her eyes, "looks like it's just you and me today." Her voice had that smooth, lilting quality that made even ordinary words feel deliberate. She stepped aside, motioning me in. The scent of coffee drifted through the hallway, warm and inviting, mingled with the faint trace of her perfume. It wasn't overwhelming, just enough to make me notice, enough to make me want to notice. I hesitated for a moment, surprised, before stepping inside. The house felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet without the usual noise of my friend. Every creak of the floorboard, every hum of the refrigerator seemed sharper in the silence. She closed the door behind me and, with a half-smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, tilted her head. "Do you dare see what I've been hiding?" The words were said like a joke, light and playful, but the way her eyes lingered made them feel heavier. I laughed nervously, unsure if she was teasing me or if there was something she truly meant beneath it. Her laugh followed mine, soft and unhurried. "Don't look so serious," she added, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "It's nothing scandalous. Just something I don't usually show people." Still, the question hung in the air like smoke, curling into my thoughts. What was she hiding? And why did she say it to me in that way, almost daring me, almost inviting me into a secret that wasn't meant for everyone? We moved toward the kitchen, the sound of her slippers brushing lightly across the tiled floor. She gestured to the counter where a fresh pot of coffee sat, steam curling upward. "Sit. I'll pour you a cup." I slid into one of the stools, the wood cool beneath my palms as I tried to steady myself. She moved with an easy grace, reaching for the mugs, her sleeve falling back just enough to reveal the smooth curve of her wrist. Every small motion seemed deliberate, though I knew it was natural to her. As she set the cup down in front of me, her fingers brushed mine. Just a fraction of a second, warm skin against mine, but it felt louder than words. "Careful," she murmured, her voice low. "It's hot." I met her eyes, and for a moment, the playful mask softened into something else, something quiet, something real. And in that moment, I realized her teasing wasn't just about what she was hiding in her home. It was about what she was hiding in herself. The coffee was rich and dark, steam curling gently into the quiet air. I wrapped my hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth, though I wasn't sure if it steadied me or unsettled me more. She sat across from me at the kitchen island, one hand cupping her own mug, the other tracing idly against the polished wood surface as if she were lost in thought. Her smile returned, softer this time, as though she was settling into the rhythm of our unexpected time together. "It's been a while since someone sat here and actually enjoyed coffee with me," she said, almost absent-mindedly. I tilted my head. "Your son doesn't join you?" She chuckled, shaking her head. "He rushes out the door with an energy drink and half a granola bar. Coffee is wasted on him." There was affection in her voice, but also a trace of something else, a quiet longing for presence, for conversation. I found myself leaning forward, elbows resting on the table. "Then I guess I'll have to drink enough for both of us." She laughed again, low and warm, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. For a moment they lingered, searching, as though she was deciding whether or not to hold the gaze. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, charged with something unspoken. I could hear the faint tick of the kitchen clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the small details of a house that suddenly felt too intimate for two people who weren't supposed to sit this close. She shifted slightly, tucking one leg beneath her, and in that small movement, the air changed. She wasn't just a mother in her kitchen anymore. She was a woman, confident yet unguarded, and I was aware of her in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be before. Her hand reached out to slide the sugar closer to me, and in the motion, her fingers brushed against the back of my hand. It was quick, perhaps accidental, but it was enough. My skin tingled from the contact, and I fought the instinct to hold on to the moment. She noticed, I think, because her lips curved in the faintest smile. "You're quiet today," she said, stirring her coffee slowly, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. "I guess I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You have a way of leaving me guessing." Her brows lifted slightly, amusement flickering across her face. "Is that so? Maybe I like keeping you on your toes." Her words carried the same teasing note as before, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, a watchfulness, a curiosity, like she was testing how far she could lean into this game without crossing the line. We spoke of small things after that, the weather, the neighbors, my plans for school. But every casual word carried undertones, every pause between sentences felt like an opening for something else. At one point, as I set my mug down, I noticed her watching me more closely than before. Not in a casual, polite way, but with an attentiveness that made my chest tighten. The kind of look you give when you want to memorize someone, even if you won't admit it. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't the coffee or the conversation that made the room feel alive. It was her. The way her laughter lingered, the way her silence spoke louder than her words, the way she seemed to draw me into her orbit without ever needing to ask. The kitchen had grown quieter, not because our conversation ended, but because it deepened into a rhythm that neither of us wanted to break. She leaned against the counter, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes distant for a moment. I noticed how her fingers lingered on the handle, the faint pressure betraying a thought she wasn't ready to share. "I don't often show this side to anyone," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Most people only see what I let them see, the jokes, the smiles, the easy charm." She laughed softly, but it was tinged with melancholy, the kind that makes you sit a little straighter, listening harder. I felt my chest tighten. There was a vulnerability there that I hadn't expected. "What side is that?" I asked gently, careful not to push too hard, but needing her to know I meant it. She hesitated, tracing the rim of her mug with a fingertip, and then motioned toward a small side table by the window. On it was a photo album, its cover worn, the edges frayed from years of handling. "This," she said. "I rarely let anyone look through it." I leaned forward instinctively, drawn in by the gravity of the moment. As she opened it, her fingers brushed over the pages with reverence, and I noticed how careful she was, as if each photograph held a fragment of her heart. The room smelled faintly of her perfume and the warm coffee, a comforting combination that made me feel simultaneously at ease and acutely aware of her presence. She paused on one photograph, herself in her 20s, laughing freely, hair tumbling around her shoulders, eyes bright with a light I hadn't seen in the present. "I was different back then," she murmured. "Less careful, more willing to let people in. I don't often show this side, not because I want to hide it, but because it's personal. Too personal, sometimes." I wanted to reach out, to let her know she didn't need to hide. Without thinking, I gently touched the back of her hand resting on the page, letting my fingers brush hers. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the playful teasing we'd shared before gave way to something deeper, more sincere. "I'm glad you're letting me see this," I said softly. "It means a lot." She smiled, and it was different this time, not teasing, not ironic, but quiet and full of trust. "I'm glad you asked to see," she replied. "Most people wouldn't even notice the album. Or if they did, they wouldn't care." The silence that followed was comfortable, almost sacred. I realized that what she was hiding wasn't just in the photographs. It was in herself, the memories, the emotions, the parts of her life that were rarely shared, even with those closest to her. Her hand lingered near mine, and I felt a subtle warmth, not just from contact, but from the realization that she trusted me enough to let me into this hidden world. And in that quiet intimacy, I understood something vital. This connection wasn't just playful curiosity anymore. It was a fragile, delicate thread forming between us, spun from trust, vulnerability, and the unspoken acknowledgement that we were both aware of its weight. The quiet intimacy of the kitchen lingered between us long after the photo album had been set aside. I could still feel the warmth of her hand where mine had brushed against hers, a brief, fleeting contact, yet one that seemed to resonate far deeper than it should. There was a tension in the air now, subtle and almost electric, that neither of us dared to name. She moved toward the counter to set down her mug, and as she turned back, her fingers accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, brushed the back of mine. I felt a shiver of awareness, the warmth of her skin lingering against mine. Neither of us withdrew our hands immediately. Instead, we let the moment stretch, small yet infinitely significant. "You're awfully quiet," she said, her voice soft, teasing, yet carrying a hint of something more. Her eyes held mine, steady and unblinking, and I realized she wasn't simply commenting on my silence. She was waiting to see how I would respond. "I'm just thinking," I replied, my throat suddenly dry, aware of how close she was standing. The subtle curve of her shoulder, the sway of her movements, even the faint scent of her perfume felt heightened in the quiet of the kitchen. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my heart stumble in a way I wasn't expecting. "Thinking about what?" she asked, stepping a fraction closer under the guise of reaching for a small plate. Her hand brushed mine again, this time slightly longer, the warmth lingering, sending a subtle thrill up my arm. I found myself noticing every small detail, the softness of her sweater against her skin, the gentle curve of her wrist as she rested it near mine, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. It was intimate without words, and I felt the quiet weight of her attention pressing in a way that was both thrilling and grounding. For a fleeting second, it felt as though the rest of the world had disappeared. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the fridge, even the muted light through the window became inconsequential. All that existed was the quiet connection, the brush of skin, the unspoken awareness of each other's presence. Her hand lingered near mine, and I finally let my own move slightly closer, fingertips just grazing hers. The contact was subtle, careful, but it carried a resonance I could not ignore. Her lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to say something, then closed again, and she smiled, a private, intimate smile, meant only for me. "You're brave, you know," she said softly, almost to herself, though I felt the weight of the words directly. "Not many people notice these small moments." "I notice," I whispered, my voice almost lost in the quiet. "I notice everything about you." The smile that flickered across her face was fleeting but genuine, and I felt it in my chest as much as I saw it on her lips. There was a magnetism now, subtle but undeniable, a delicate tension that neither of us could fully name but both of us felt, pulling us into a closeness either had anticipated. And in that shared space, between the brush of fingertips and the warmth of her gaze, I realized we had crossed an invisible line. Not in words, not in action, but in awareness, a quiet recognition of desire, curiosity, and something far deeper than either of us had allowed ourselves to admit. The warmth from our earlier moments still lingered in my chest, but as I sipped my coffee, a sudden heaviness settled over me. It wasn't her, it was me, my mind running through every possible consequence, every reason why this shouldn't be happening. She was my friend's mother. A woman I admired, trusted, and increasingly felt drawn to, but a line existed, sharp and undeniable, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. She seemed to sense the change in my demeanor. Her hand, which had lingered so naturally before, now hovered near mine but didn't touch. She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing in subtle concern. "You're quiet again," she said softly, not teasing this time. There was an edge of worry there, and I realized she could feel the tension in the air just as much as I could. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. I trailed off, unable to form the words without sounding awkward. Every sentence I considered seemed clumsy, too honest, too heavy. The reality of our situation pressed against me, the age difference, the social expectations, the simple fact that this wasn't supposed to feel this way. Her expression softened, and she took a slow breath. "I know this might feel complicated," she admitted, her voice low, sincere. "I don't usually let people get close to this part of me. Most would just leave after a few polite minutes." The confession made my chest tighten. There it was again, that vulnerability I hadn't been prepared for, the quiet weight of her life experiences, the complexity of her heart that I couldn't ignore. I wanted to reach for her, to assure her, to tell her that I understood and that I cared, but the fear of crossing boundaries froze me in place. I began, hesitating, aware of the silence between us. "I don't want to make this awkward or uncomfortable for you." Her lips curved faintly, a mixture of amusement and sadness. "It's not awkward," she said. "Not with you. But there's hesitation, isn't there? You're thinking about everything we shouldn't be thinking about." I nodded, unable to hide it. The truth was undeniable. My heart ached with curiosity, attraction, and admiration all tangled together, and I hated that part of me felt this drawn to her when logic screamed otherwise. She leaned back slightly, creating a small physical distance that mirrored the invisible boundary between us. "I won't push you," she said softly. "But I also won't pretend that I don't feel it too." Her words sent a thrill through me and simultaneously made me ache. Here she was, admitting her own hesitation, mirroring mine, acknowledging the tension that neither of us could ignore. And yet, the weight of reality pressed in, my friend, society, the roles we were expected to play. We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts, the air thick with unspoken longing. Every glance carried meaning, every small movement became charged with significance. I realized that hesitation wasn't just fear, it was respect, awareness, and the complexity of emotions neither of us could fully untangle yet. In that quiet, I understood that this was the true tension, not desire, not curiosity, but the delicate balance between yearning and restraint, the fragile space where two people could feel everything and still choose to pause. The afternoon had slipped into early evening, and the kitchen was bathed in the warm glow of fading sunlight. Shadows stretched across the counters and floor, and every detail seemed sharper, the subtle scent of her perfume, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the quiet thrum of my own heartbeat. I realized how aware I had become of her presence, of every movement, every small gesture. She stood by the door, gathering her things, but there was a hesitation in her posture. Her eyes met mine, and I noticed the depth of emotion behind her playful exterior, a mix of curiosity, longing, and something softer, almost fragile. I felt my chest tighten, the pull of unspoken desire strong and undeniable. "Do you have to go?" she asked quietly, her fingers brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The motion was simple, ordinary, yet the intimacy of it, so close, so deliberate, made me acutely aware of the space between us. "I should," I replied, my voice unsteady, though I wasn't entirely sure if I was speaking the truth. Part of me wanted to stay, to linger in this charged quiet that neither of us fully understood. She stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her. Not so close as to cross a line, but close enough that the distance between us felt negligible. My eyes flicked to her hands, and I noticed how delicately she held them near her waist, fingers brushing together in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy with possibility. I felt a magnetic pull, the kind that made your pulse race and your stomach tighten, that made you want to close the distance but fear the consequences at the same time. Her gaze softened, and she lifted a hand, letting her fingers hover near my forehead. Slowly, deliberately, she brushed a stray lock of hair from my face, her touch lingering just long enough for me to feel the warmth of her skin. My breath caught, the contact was subtle, almost fleeting, yet it sent a shiver through me that I couldn't ignore. "You're different than I expected," she murmured, almost to herself, though the words were meant for me. There was a vulnerability there, a quiet admission that mirrored my own conflicted emotions. I wanted to respond, to tell her everything I was feeling, but the weight of hesitation, of propriety, held me back. We stood there, so close that our shadows mingled on the floor. Every glance, every subtle movement, felt magnified, the way her eyes softened, the slight tilt of her head, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. There was longing in the space between us, unspoken but undeniable. Finally, she smiled, small, almost shy, and stepped back, just enough to create the necessary distance. But in that brief moment, the tension remained, lingering in the air like a promise. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the connection we both felt, a recognition that something had shifted irrevocably, even if the world outside would never understand. The evening had fully settled now, the soft, golden light replaced by the gentle glow of indoor lamps. The house, once lively with the distant hum of day-to-day life, had grown quiet, as if holding its breath for what was about to unfold. I lingered near the door, unsure if I wanted to leave, knowing that whatever secret she was about to reveal would change everything. She approached with a calmness that belied the teasing words she had spoken earlier. There was a softness to her movements now, a quiet grace that seemed to draw the room into her orbit. In her hands she carried a small, carefully wrapped box. My curiosity sharpened, but this time, it wasn't playful, it was intimate, weighted with meaning. "This is what I meant earlier," she said softly, setting the box on the table in front of me. "What I've been hiding." Her voice was gentle, yet it carried a depth that made me lean forward instinctively, wanting to understand. I lifted the lids slowly, careful not to rush the moment. Inside was a collection of personal keepsakes, photographs of moments she had never shared, letters she had written but never sent, and small trinkets that seemed ordinary yet radiated a deep personal history. Each item spoke of a side of her that few had seen, a life layered with experiences, joys, and regrets. She watched me as I examined the contents, and I realized she wasn't just sharing objects, she was sharing herself. The trust inherent in this act was palpable, and it made my heart ache with warmth and reverence. "I don't usually let anyone see these things," she admitted, her fingers brushing lightly against one of the letters. "They're pieces of me I've kept private for a long time." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "But I wanted you to see. I trust you." The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. Trust wasn't something she gave lightly, and to receive it felt like an honor I couldn't quite name. I wanted to tell her how much it meant, but words failed me. Instead, I reached out, letting my fingers brush hers ever so lightly across the edge of the box. She didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed the contact, a quiet affirmation of the connection that had grown between us. We sat together in silence, flipping through the memories, each piece revealing more of who she was and, in turn, drawing me closer. It wasn't a confession of love in the traditional sense, but it was far more profound, a shared vulnerability that created a bond neither of us could ignore. When the moment came to say goodbye, the air between us was thick with unspoken emotion. She stood near the door, and as I turned to leave, she reached out, her fingers brushing against my hand, lingering. "You were brave enough to see, after all," she whispered, a mix of playfulness and sincerity in her tone. I left the house with a heart that felt fuller, heavier, yet lighter all at once. It wasn't about crossing a line or breaking rules. It was about connection, trust, and the quiet acknowledgement that some bonds defy explanation. That day, I realized what she had truly been hiding wasn't objects or secrets, it was herself. And for the first time, she had let someone see all of it. The evening faded behind me, but the warmth of that trust, the subtle brush of her hand, and the depth of her gaze lingered long after I stepped into the night, leaving me with the undeniable certainty that something extraordinary had begun, quietly and irrevocably.